This podcast is part of the Batman Universe Podcast Network, hosted by the BatmanUniverse.net. Check out everything related to Batman and the entire Bat family at the BatmanUniverse.net, including news and original content related to comics, movies, television, merchandise, video games, and more. Also, check out some of the other unique podcasts that TBU has to offer. Consider supporting this podcast by becoming a patron on Patreon. Even $1 can go a long way in supporting this content that you enjoy. Look for a link over at the BatmanUniverse.net to offer your support now. And now, on with the show.
Hi, this is Jim Lee, and you're listening to the Batman Universe Comic Podcast.
Hi, I'm Dan Jurgens, and you're listening to the Batman Universe.
Hey, this is Scott Snyder, and you're listening to the Batman Universe Comic Podcast.
You want to get nuts? Come on, let's get nuts.
Hello everyone, welcome to the Batman Universe Comic Podcast, episode number 265. I'm your host, Dustin, and today I have with me...
This is Steph.
And this is Ian.
And we are bringing the latest comic news and comic book reviews from the weeks of January 6th through January 19th. We have a total of 2 books to cover. Honestly, that's every episode, and we have just a little bit of news, like every episode. So, let's get into the news so we can get on to the reviews, so we can get into the questions, because that's what I think the majority of you are looking forward to, including myself. So, starting off with the news, the first bit of news we have is on January 8th, DC announced that they have joined with Comixology and other Amazon subscription services. They have, including Kindle Unlimited and Prime Reading. Select titles are available immediately on these services at no additional cost. Comixology Unlimited costs $5.99 a month with a free 30-day trial for new subscribers. Comixology boasts thousands of select single issues from DC Comics, as well as Vertigo, are now available on the service. Kindle Unlimited has a selection of single issues, collections, and graphic novels, while Prime Reading will feature a rotating, curated list of comics as well, similar to that of DC Universe. The move to join Amazon's service is one that was years in the making, with Comixology first starting their subscription service back in 2016, which included multiple comic book publishers, but not DC Comics or Marvel, who of which had their own, Marvel obviously has their own subscription service priced around $10, called Marvel Unlimited, which we've talked about briefly in past episodes. DC joining shows major growth for the subscription service and also may shed a shadow on the current offerings of DC Universe. There was a small list of titles that are included that Comixology said. This includes Batgirl, the Batgirl from Rebirth, Batman from New 52, Batwoman from the New 52, Batman The Dark Knight Returns, Batman The Long Halloween, Batman White Knight, Harley Quinn Rebirth, Identity Crisis, Injustice Gods Among Us, Injustice 2, and Teen Titans from Rebirth. So those are all titles that you can find on Comixology Unlimited. It's kind of up in the air. If you want to hear a lot more in-depth details about this, if you have Comixology Unlimited or one of those other Amazon services, myself and Josh both talked about this at very great length, way more length than I thought we probably could have, as part of a TBU Raw episode, which is exclusive to our Patreon supporters at the $3 level. So if you're more interested in hearing even more about that than we're talking briefly here, check that out over on Patreon.
Plug.
Yeah. I'm just going to keep trying to figure out as many ways to plug it as I can. The other bit of news we have comes on January 18th. DC announced that they have a Target exclusive comic now. This joins the Walmart exclusive books, but this is a one-shot, not a ongoing, as the Batman ongoing, as well as the other books, which but coincidentally just happened to be this past week. They also announced that the slate of Walmart books is expanding from Batman, Superman, and then they're changing the Justice League title over to Wonder Woman, and they're changing the Teen Titans title over to Titans, and they're adding Flash and Swamp Thing, which was pretty predictable since they had a Flash for the holidays and they had a Swamp Thing for Halloween. I don't know how long they're planning on doing that, if they'll switch it up again, but those are coming. So in February, all 6 of those titles will be out at Walmart. Nothing obviously changes to the Batman book, but they did announce later in the week that Target has an exclusive book, and this one is focused solely on the recent DC Primal Age action figure line by Funko. If you have been paying attention to news on the site outside of the comic stuff, you may have heard around New York Comic Con that there was a new Barbarian-style universe. Basically, think He-Man and Masters of the Universe that was like mixed in with the DC universe, and it has a bunch of characters that from existing characters from the DC universe with new backstories and power sets. It was exclusive to Amazon at the time during the holidays, but now I guess it's making its way to Target. I've been to Target, I haven't seen it, but then again, maybe it just went out this week, I don't know. But typically, Target just reset all their toy sections. I'm going to get into a merch thing that I'm not going to do. I'm not going to do it. I could talk about merch a lot. I like talking about merch, even though I don't buy that much merch. I love talking about it. But anyway, there is a exclusive comic tied into it. This is a 100-page comic giant, but it actually has 100 pages of new content. These stories all feature the characters from the action figure line. There is a total of 6 different stories featured in the giant. It does cost $10, which is obviously $5 more than the Walmart 100-page giants, but this is all fresh content. So if you are one who really likes the Elseworld type stories where it's off-the-wall craziness, here's your chance to dive in and see what DC has to offer with this new one-shot. So take a look.
And I have taken a look at it, and it feels very much like those Elseworlds. Like Chuck Dixon did a great one called Justice Riders, where it's like Justice League in the Wild West, and then of course there's, the famous Red Rain, where Batman's a vampire. It feels like a fun Elseworlds. I just wish they'd spent a little bit more on the art.
Do you think this is a sign that that Walmart's going well, and so they're expanding, or that they're... I guess it's all new stuff, right? So they're not trying to get the most bang for their buck because it's new stuff.
Here's the thing. I think the Walmart stuff is successful. I don't know by what standards they're measuring it to figure out whether or not successful. I mean, I've heard every month I see reports about the new Walmart books. It's literally something that, for whatever reason, the comic community loves to talk about, comics journalism community loves to talk about, I should say, where they talk about whether or not the new books are stocked at their store, what the display looks like, if the display box has gone missing, is it just sitting on the shelf and it's a pile of comics that you don't even know what it is except for a pile of books. Everybody wants to talk about this every single month, and it's slightly crazy, but the thing is, I think that they are selling well enough where they are expanding. The biggest thing is not so much whether or not they're expanding to the Target one. They're increasing the number of books from 4 to 6, which is a big deal, because if they honestly think that that Swamp Thing can actually maintain a significant audience with a mainstream retailer like Walmart, that has to be pretty significant by itself. Which means that either that Halloween giant that they had featuring Swamp Thing did like crazy well.
Well, that's actually very misleading. Swamp Thing, they shipped literally 20 issues to every store. It got its own case, but those things are not selling. I bought one, but I check every week because it's my job to review this one, and those things are not selling. The Christmas ones sold a lot, but the Halloween ones did not. So I really don't understand why they went with Swamp Thing.
Swamp Thing is kind of a mystery, quite honestly. I don't really understand that one. Changing Justice League to Wonder Woman is perfectly fine, makes sense. Wonder Woman is very popular right now. Having a Flash one is again not that big of a deal. Teen Titans into Titans, I guess. I don't know if they're going to change the roster, but whatever. I mean, like, honestly, it could change to whatever they want. It just depends on how long they want to do.
Just to tie into the show, get that synergy.
Probably. And the other thing is, like, let's be honest here. Batman and Superman are the ones that have big, high-profile name writers attached to, and they're writing, like, 12-part stories. So they're not going to do anything to those two. But the rest of them are just telling, like, shorter stories, shorter arcs. They're not telling like these massive 12-page or 12 issue story arcs. So the thing is, like, there's no reason they couldn't change them if they needed to. If they think something's going to sell better, then make something sell better. You know, like they could eventually do a Young Justice one if they wanted to, and include content from Titans or Teen Titans, Young Justice, the 90s series. They could reprint some of the stuff from Young Justice, the series that just launched, you know, in 6 months or something. Like, there's no reason they couldn't do something like that later on if they wanted to. So the Target one, though, is interesting because there must be at least a desire by Target to get in on these comics, because they had to obviously, you know, sign some sort of exclusive contract with DC to get this comic book made, and then promise the book was going to actually be in stores too. So it's interesting because potentially after the first initial 12 months, could we see it expand into Target as well? Or could we see other comics tied into action figure lines in the future as well, if that's what the route that Target goes? Target has gotten a lot more into exclusive merch. I know they have a lot of exclusive pop figures, and they've had in the past exclusive action figure lines and things like that, where Walmart has certain figures as part of an exclusive line or something like that, but Target has in some cases gone like above and beyond doing some stuff for exclusive, especially now that Toys R Us isn't around. Again, I'm getting off track here and talking too much about merch, but that's the idea. I mean, I honestly feel like maybe Target wants to get in on these exclusive comics because they feel like there is a market for them, because they did set up a whole new section at Target for like specifically collector items and things like that too, or like fan genre specific type items that sell well to, you know, they're like the spur of the moment type purchases that you're going to buy just because you like what you see. So maybe they do want to get in on it, and this is their way of doing it, is having the comic tie into the action figure line will show them whether or not it's like a test for them, but at the same time it can, you know, they can gauge a response and see how well it does, and then in turn maybe get in on some exclusive comics later on.
So does the art look like the Funko Pop dolls?
They look, not the Funko Pop dolls, the Funko action figures. There's a whole separate line of characters. And I'm not joking when I say, like, take a He-Man from the 80s and make it a Batman, and that is what they look like, with much less articulation. But they did have a playset, which is really cool. It's like a Batcave, but it was like shaped kind of like Castle Grayskull. I mean, like, they went, I don't know how this, I have no idea how this came to be, and the entire thing was kind of a mystery to me, because it was randomly mentioned, like, briefly at the end of, like, a DC Daily interview with Dan DiDio about how Marv Wolfman came with this idea called Primal Age back in the early, or late 70s, early 80s, and it just was sitting there, and it was, like, such a weird, brief mention. I was like, what the heck did that have to do with? And then, like, 3 weeks later, Funko is revealing an action figure line that turns in, you know, that's using this idea that Marv Wolfman came up with years ago. I'm like, what? Clearly, they dropped it in there for a reason.
Marv Wolfman is writing the main story.
Yes, like this was planned, obviously, but it's like one of those things where it's like it's so outside the box, and I don't know.
Well, I think that the outside the box thing is really good in a lot of ways, because we mentioned, I think last issue, we've mentioned several times that DC's not doing digital first anymore. And I think that's because digital is not a growth market for comics. Not that it couldn't be, but until tablets get better, like in terms of like tablets get more common, you're not really going to see many people reading Western comics on their phones, because it's just miserable. I've tried and it's not fun. But these Walmart comics and Target and other retailers, they're a new audience. You know, they're your kids in the checkout line. They're like, Mom, get me this comic. That's the new audience that DC and all comics need to have.
Yeah.
They do put the comics in with the Yu-Gi-Oh cards and the Pokemon cards. Like, those are the,
You're going to get people to see them. So, and Target has that specific spot in every single store that's right next to the checkout lanes for all the trading cards and the collectible cards and that kind of stuff. So it makes perfect sense for it to be right there. So, all right, so that's all the news. That DC Primal Age, obviously there's no digital version of it, and you're not going to find it in a comic store, but if you do want to check it out, you could check it out at Target. Outside of that, we're going to jump straight into our comic book reviews, and we're going to start off with Batman.
Batman number 62, writer Tom King, artist Mitch Gerads. Batman wakes up, forcing his eyes open. He evaluates his situation, seeing Professor Pig. Hanging upside down, bound by ropes, he plans to escape. Suddenly covered in blood and screaming, he gains control, working one figure free, using it to use a hidden batarang to saw at the ropes. Batman headbutts Pig, his hands free, and lands on the ground. Though Pig squeals, Batman can't hear anything. Overconfident, Batman leaps right onto Pig's vicious stab to the belly. Grasping at calm, Batman pulls the blade out and throws it perfectly, hitting Pig in the mask with the handle. Batman looms over Pig, stepping on him, breaking bones, but pulls back to avoid killing him. He still can't hear anything Pig screams. In his confusion, Batman lets Pig back up and gets his knife back. As Pig monologues to an unhearing Batman, he tries to remember how he got there. His train of thoughts skips unsteadily from Bane to Penguin, to Arkham, to his quest for the truth of Bane's control of Arkham, to Alfred on the floor saying something about his father? Snapping out of his attempts to remember, Batman hurls batarangs at Pig, but the villain catches them. Batman remembers seeing red eyes as he turned away from Alfred on the ground. Engaging in a martial arts battle with Pig, Batman tries to connect Pig to anything that came before. Pygmalion, that's a Greek myth, the Greek myth of Pygmalion, his love for Catwoman, his loss of his family the second time, and the two end standing in front of each other. Batman finally forces himself to speak. How did I get here? How do I get out? Pig responds with the words of the Three Little Pigs poem, in the voice of the wolf, then removes his mask, revealing Robin, Damian Wayne, who responds in the voice of the pigs. Batman looks at the floor as Robin leaves, shaken, evaluating, trying to grasp the metaphor, myth, story, dream of what just happened. So as you can tell from my synopsis, this was a very confusing issue, and I think on purpose. I just have two questions for discussion. The first is, what do you think is happening here? The last issue with, what's his name? The Master Bruce kid. That was clearly sort of a side story connected to the previous Master Bruce story. But this is from Batman's perspective. So what's happening here?
So, my only guess is that this is in fact a series of nightmares, as the arc implies, and these aren't actually happening. That's how you can probably explain Damian randomly appearing in the midst of the story. There's something, he's been infected with something, or he is under the control of something, and he's seeing these different things. The Master Bruce thing, however, I can't explain, because I thought the intent of that was to further the Master Bruce story of whatever it may be. I figured that was what they were trying to do there, but there was a lot of twisted stuff that was like, we were seeing one thing and then there was actually something else. So I wonder if maybe we were seeing it from Batman's perspective as an outsider watching it and then seeing... But I don't know, it gets crazy to explain this stuff. But then again, if it really are nightmares and maybe Flashpoint Batman has somehow infected or is controlling Batman to the point where he can control his dreams, or in this case nightmares, then maybe that's what's going on. But honestly, outside of that, the most obvious explanation of it being nightmares, I can't think of what it might be.
Yeah, this one in particular I liked because it seemed to, we're complaining a lot about, where's the fallout from all this crap happening to him? Why is he not dealing with this? And this one seems to be a way that Batman might deal with it. And so I wonder if all these nightmares are taking the last 60 issues of Tom King's run and saying, okay, well, how's Batman dealing with it, or how is he not dealing with it? I'll admit that in college, I I suppressed so many things that apparently in my sleep I was talking to my roommate, having very good discussions about what she was thinking, and that she was me, and apparently I was talking in my sleep because I suppressed so much. Don't do that. It's a crazy person thing to do. And Batman, I think, is the type of person that does not talk about his emotions. Like, I very highly doubt that he ever had a psychiatrist that he went to visit and discuss these things. Otherwise, he would dress like a bat and go out at night and try to get all the criminals locked up. But I think that's probably what a lot of these are going to be, is how, and this one in particular is fairly straightforward in that is what's on his mind. What is he thinking about? What are his nightmares about? So it is possible that, like, he's been drugged by Flashpoint Batman. One of my theories about Flashpoint Batman is that when Thomas Wayne told him stop being Batman, he meant it. And so when Batman didn't stop being Batman, he came back and he's going to teach his son a lesson. Kind of drawing more the parallel between what was his name? Russian guy. KG Beast. That the KG Beast's abusive father might have more in common with Bruce Wayne's father, but that's a terrible theory. But
it's as far-fetched as anything else.
It's true. And so
I don't think it's that crazy.
So Thomas Wayne is now coming back and making his son, reevaluate his life the hard way, because he's not doing it on his own, apparently. So yeah, that's kind of my theory, is that, and I hadn't actually thought about that first, even though it was called Nightmares Part 1, I hadn't really thought about it being Bruce's nightmare, but it makes sense, because so much of it was from Batman's point of view. Like, it would make sense that it was Batman's nightmare about Matthew Hush, or whatever his name is, right? But yeah, that's my theory.
I think that's absolutely right. I think that somehow this is caused by Thomas Wayne, whether it's like a virtual reality, maybe like if you saw Incredibles 2, he had the screenslaver with the goggles on people's eyes that controlled them. I mean, maybe that's something like what's going on here. But I personally think this is directly what is happening to Batman. Like, he got knocked out, and then Thomas Wayne is somehow controlling, and Bane, of course, is somehow controlling what's going on. And I also absolutely agree with Steph that this is Tom King exploring Batman's feelings about what happened with the wedding and with Nightwing, because Batman doesn't deal with stuff. He not only does he not deal with stuff, he doesn't sleep enough to talk about it in his sleep. So this is sort of Tom King forcing Batman to sleep and deal with all the just incredible trauma and loss that he's gone through recently. And I think as much as I really did not enjoy the first issue of Nightmares with Master Bruce, this one I think was much more, because it was dealing directly with the whole Thomas Wayne and Batman's trying to figure out, am I trapped in a nightmare or what's going on? Like, it feels like it connected to the whole Tyrant Wing storyline. It doesn't feel like something out of nowhere. I think this was much more satisfying. My second question is, what did you guys think of Mitch Gerads' art? This is an issue that was delayed because Mitch Gerads has been delayed in almost all of his projects recently. I don't know if you read the Mr. Miracle series, but he was the artist on that, and he also did the two Rooftops issues way back in the first year of Rebirth. So what do you think of this Professor Pig fight in Mitch Gerads' hands?
To be fair, and I want to point this out only because I remember reading this on Twitter, Mitch had a newborn in May of last year, and that was why Mr. Miracle had some delays, was because Tom King wanted to make sure that Mitch had some extra time because he was going to be around a newborn. So that was part of the reason why Mr. Miracle was delayed, because initially it wasn't delayed, and then all of a sudden the baby was coming. So I just want to give him the benefit of doubt in that regard. This issue, however, it could have easily, I mean, I'm not one to sit here and fault a guy for having a child. I've got 3 kids. I know how it is. And once your kid is, 6 months old, it's not the same as a newborn, so it's a little bit easier to manage your time and things like that, hypothetically, in most situations. So, I'm not sure why it was delayed. I will say it seems like he went above and beyond, like, as far as detail. And when I say detail, that's in the loosest term. There's a lot going on every single page, but it's not necessarily like drawing cityscapes and drawing like extremely detailed, huge groups of people with tons of facial expressions, or the audience of theater. It's not like those kind of things. It's just there's a lot going on every single page, and my only thought is that he just spent more time than maybe he wanted to, mostly because Mr. Miracle was so critically well received that he felt like if he was going to be on Batman again, he wanted to make sure that he went above and beyond and did something that was, different. Because I was watching some interview with Liam Sharp, and he was like, "Oh yeah, I got offered my first DC gig was they offered me a Batman story, and who's not going to take Batman?" But I had to get a 22-page comic done in basically 2 weeks, which is mostly unheard of. And I look back and I look at it and I think to myself, wow, it looks like crap. And it was an interesting story. And I thought to myself, well, I'm sure that there's a lot of artists who, like, if they were offered Batman, they would never say no. But there probably are some, like, really weird situations where it's like, do you want to do Batman? Yes. Okay, you need to do it within this certain allotted time, and you're only going to have the script this far in advance or whatever. Like, there could be situations like that. This just feels like he was on the book. He's been on the book before. He's with Tom King, and he wanted to do something different and really accent what he's capable of, so that it would be showcased in, most of the time the top-selling book of the month. So that's my only assumption.
I don't know his life. I wouldn't tell you why it took so long. I mean, there's definitely a nightmarish feel to this. I mean, again, if you read Mr. Miracle, by the end, spoiler if you don't want to know, but by the end, you don't know what this story was. Was it a dream? Was it a nightmare? Was it death? Was it hell? Was it heaven? What's going on? And so that feeling really persists in this story. So, like, if you couldn't tell pretty early that this is some kind of weird nightmare, then you weren't looking at the art, because it was just really, really weird. But I don't know. I think he did a good job, and I don't know enough about writing comics to say that yes, this would have taken him longer than he had originally planned. But who knows why stuff happens. But I liked the art for what it was, which was a nightmare. If this had just been a real thing and Batman actually had been, strung up by Professor Pig, I probably would not have liked it as much.
I thought the art was extremely dramatic.
Yes.
I'm kind of harsh on Grad's. I don't really like the art for either Sheriff of Babylon or Mr. Miracle very much. I think he relies a bit too much on weird coloring techniques that you do see here. There's a lot of like bleed of color outside of lines and a lot of really unnatural colors that I think really work for the playing with reality and perception that they're doing here. But it's not to my taste. I prefer a cleaner style, more straightforward storytelling. However, Garad's really plays to his strengths here. Like the images of Batman, the stark black and the yellows and the reds are just so dramatic. They really grab your eye and grab your emotions. And even though I actually really dislike Professor Pig, I don't see his thematic purpose except that he's just really gross. I see the thematic point of almost every Batman villain, but Pig and I would say Black Mask both are just evil, and I don't see any real deeper point that you can make with them. I guess Grant Morrison did a little bit with that, but I will say, if you're going for a gross villain, Mitch Gerads does an amazing gross villain. It's very gross and scary, and that was extremely well conveyed by Gerads, both in art, and Gerads also did his own colors here, so very effective work, even if it's not personally to my taste. But I'm spoiled because I'm really looking forward to Amanda Connor and Lee Weeks on the latter half of this Nightmares arc. So that's all I really have to discuss on Batman. Why don't we do our ratings?
Okay, so Batman number 62, I'm going to give a total of 3.5 out of 5 Batarangs.
I concur. 3.5 out of 5.
I believe I also gave it 3.5 out of 5.
So that's going to give Batman a total of 3.5 out of 5 Batarangs. Let's move into our next book, Detective Comics. Detective Comics number 996, written by Peter Tomasi, art by Doug Mahnke. As Bruce leaves Arkham, the inmates complain about what he did to them. When Bruce returned to the Batcave, he asks Damian about Alfred. Damian states Alfred has a lot of air in his pleural cavity, and he's been thinking that they should leave the chest tube in for a few more days. Bruce mentions that he did not think Damian would respond to his call. Damian makes it known that he did not come there for his father-son time. He came because Alfred needed him. Damian asks Bruce about his visit to Arkham. Bruce responds, someone has threatened the inmates not to talk. Damian notes that these attacks have all been personal, which is helpful. They are coming from someone who knows Bruce is Batman, which we happened to talk about last episode. Damian mentions his mom, Talia, and grandfather, Ra's al Ghul, are on the list. Bruce admits that they most likely did not plan this attack, as they would not be so indirect. Immediately, both Bruce and Damian say, Henry Ducard, and Damian states that Ducard must have found out what happened to his son, as seen way back in Batman and Robin during the New 52. Bruce chimes in and states Ducard's last known location is in Paris. Bruce asks if Damian could take a leave from the Teen Titans for a few days and watch over Alfred as he heads to Paris. He also tells Damian that once he comes back, they need to sit down and straighten things out between them, and Damian agrees. In Paris, Bruce, using numerous disguises, asks and interrogates a multitude of people for information on Ducard. He finally comes across Ducard in the catacombs beneath Paris. Ducard feels Bruce's presence and draws his pistol, but Bruce disarms him, and then Ducard asks how he found him. Bruce states that he, meaning Ducard, had taught him how to hunt. As tensions cool, Ducard states Bruce's distaste of firearms is interesting even after all this time. Bruce tells him that Gotham criminals know he does not need a gun to hurt them or stop them. Ducard mentions that how his son Morgan was quite aware of that fact. Bruce gets to the point. Ducard sent Morgan to kill him. Morgan failed, and Bruce sent him back to his father. Then, just to be rude, Morgan tried to take Damian. Despite Bruce's wishes, Damian killed Morgan. These personal attacks are retribution for Damian's actions. Morgan recorded himself fighting Damian to show his old man the final victory. Instead, Morgan forced his father to watch his death on a live feed. Ducard states Morgan lost and Bruce won. Well, he won the battle, but not the war. Bruce asks if this is a war, is he attacking and murdering people he cares about to avenge his son? Ducard tells him that he's not waging a war. The nasty catacomb he lives in is not a staging ground for a strike. Bruce says that it does look like Ducard is ready to make his last stand, but Ducard mentions that other people are after him as well, and if Bruce can find him, then surely others are on their way as well. At that moment, the monster from Gotham that killed Leslie attacks. This monster's face morphs into Bruce's greatest rogues. Ducard states that this thing is made up of protoplasm, which he shoots, and the monster instantaneously heals then. The monster then starts to engulf Ducard, and Ducard grabs a grenade. He tells Bruce that he not only got to kill the son, but also the father. As he pulls the grenade explodes and presumably kills the monster, and Bruce is saved. Bruce climbs to the top of the mountain in North Korea. Once he climbs over the ledge, he sees a multitude of ninjutsu students murdered in front of their temple. There's a bat symbol made out of their blood at the entrance to the temple. The last surviving student of the temple is Kriegi, who vows to punish this man who wears the symbol of a bat. Bruce states that he has reached the summit on his own accord, unaided by machines or others, and according to the custom, he has the right to see Master Sensei Kriegi. After a quick fight where Bruce promptly gets the upper hand, Sensei Kriegi congratulates Bruce for almost beating to death his lone surviving student who is protecting him. Kriegi debriefs Bruce on the attack on the temple and asks Bruce to bring his monstrosity to justice. Bruce tells him that he will, and he leaves. Bruce then parachutes off into a desolate area in New Mexico. Immediately, a man wearing a Mr. Miracle costume tells Bruce to leave now, for it is a trap. Bruce tells Thaddeus to grab his hand, for the ground is flipping over. Bruce tries to get Thaddeus and himself off the unsettled ground, but they fall into the trap. Okay, so there's a bunch of stuff that happens in this issue. It really feels like we are flying through. I don't know about you guys, but like after the last couple issues of the attack, we're only the third issue into Tomasi's run at this point, and we have what seems to be like a massive amount of stuff that's been happening. Leslie was attacked. We had the staged, Bruce's parents, the murder that was staged as Bruce's parents. We had Leslie attacked. Leslie ultimately dies. We had Alfred attacked. Now we have Henry Ducard attacked, and now he's dead. We have the sensei that's taught Bruce. His whole monastery is attacked, and multiple people die there. Now there's this Mr. Miracle. Now, I'll be full and upfront. I don't know very much about Thaddeus as Mr. Miracle. I didn't even know there was more than one Mr. Miracle until after I read the issue and then did a little bit of research to figure out who the guy was. It also explains why the cover of 997 has Batman wearing a Mr. Miracle costume, but not really.
It sort of explains.
Yeah, it sort of explains it. But anyway, there's a lot happening here. In 3 issues, there's a ton of stuff that's going on, and it really does feel like we're on a sprint to number 1000 at this point, because that's where we're all headed with this story, and eventually learning that the Arkham Knight is the one who is behind all of this stuff. I want to ask the quick question, because it was something that I thought about. With everything that's going on over in Batman, with Bane, with this massive plot, including multitude of people and characters and plots and all kinds of stuff that all somehow ties together, this is not as drastically as large as what's happening over in Batman, but it does feel like somebody's orchestrating a lot of different things similarly to the way that Bane is. Mm-hmm. Do you think that's a problem? Do you think that too many people are going to eventually start to draw comparisons between the two series because we have these like two big master plots that of massive things happening to Bruce Wayne and the people who surround Bruce Wayne? Like, we just had Dick shot in the head just a little while ago in the pages of Batman, which was a huge thing, but then we have Leslie dying, and we've got Henry Ducard dying, and we've got, all kinds of stuff happening. It just feels like there's a lot happening in 2 books that are happening at the same time. Do you think that's okay, or do you have a problem with it?
I think no matter what anyone says, you just have to acknowledge that these aren't connected. They may mention each other, there may be crossovers, but they are obviously not talking. The two teams making these stories, they're just not talking to each other. And so, yes, the story might be similar, but I think they're different enough that it's okay. Because this one really seems more, even though it's emotional, it's more of a violent story, I guess, whereas the other one really seems to be more psychological. Because we've just spent so much time really getting into Bruce's character and what he loves and then what's taken away from him, whereas this is, like you said, this is a roller coaster ride storyline right now, and so this is definitely more like a condensed movie version of what's happening in Batman. So I think they're different enough, and I think where the stories are going are different enough. That yes, people probably will complain. People will probably find parallels and similarities and stuff. But I'm enjoying both for completely different reasons.
I think that with Batman, there's always a tendency to go for the master criminal. I mean, he's got so many supervillains. And especially with the tendency of writing for the trade, writing for a long arc. To have a long arc, you have to have a big plot, a big villain. And so I mean, you could just as well say that Scott Snyder's Court of Owls and Grant Morrison's Black Glove, and then even Chuck Dixon, Doug Munch, and Denny O'Neill's Nightfall and Bruce Wayne Murderer. I mean, these are all stories of a master criminal attacking Bruce from his past or his family. I think it's just a normal Batman thing. And any good Batman writer, and even a bad Batman writer, will know this about Batman and structure his story accordingly. I think my biggest problem is that Tom King's been really clear about his villains and his motivations, although he's also really good at throwing twists in so that we're really disoriented. We've already talked about who is Arkham Knight, and my big worry is that it's just going to be another Tommy Elliott, only we haven't even had a Tommy Elliott introduced, so if it were a new character, it's going to be completely meaningless. Which is why I'm still hoping that we're getting some kind of alternate universe Bruce or Jason. Because I think that would be the least disappointing, I think, in terms of the reveal of who's behind it all. So I think they're different enough that they'll definitely get different audiences and really satisfy both of them.
I agree. I think that they are definitely different enough to attract different audiences. I'm actually drawn more towards this because even though it does feel really, really fast, and it feels like we're really, like I said, sprinting towards 1000, which is kind of like the culmination of this story and eventually the reveal of who the Arkham Knight is and things like that. Even though we're sprinting towards that, I am not necessarily opposed, because the alternative at this point would be Batman, and how we're basically going to get 4 years of a story, drawn out, and then finally get to the conclusion, or get to, the bigger point of whatever that is, whatever it ends up being, because at this point we don't even know what the whole thing is. So,
do you think we're really going to get the identity of the Arkham Knight in 1000, though?
I would say so.
Because I thought we were just going to have him appear.
Yeah, I think we're going to get the identity. And the only reason I say that is because I feel like Arkham, like, if it was just him showing up, who cares? You have to establish who he is, otherwise, like, what's the point? If he's just, like, going to be like, oh, the first appearance of Arkham Knight is this, but we don't know anything about him, it's nothing special. It just reveals that he's there, but we already know he's coming, so, like, what's really the reveal then? You know what I'm saying? Like, what's the big deal for Arkham Knight to be in number 1000 if it's not showing who he is? If we're just going to see him for the first time, as they've publicized in the press releases and things, the first, main continuity appearance of the Arkham Knight, then that's not really anything to, like, warrant my interest. I don't need to see some guy walking around in a mask. I've already seen him on the cover. I don't need to see the guy, like, I know he's going to be there, so it's not like there's anything there. I hope, and I'm going to say that I'm assuming that his identity is going to be revealed in number 1000, because it also makes it a point, be like, oh wow, there's actually something really important to talk about this issue. Nobody's going to talk about a story that just introduces a character that they already told us was going to be introduced, back in, 4 months before the issue came out, as well as the cover of the book. So I would imagine that he's going to get revealed.
Also, in this one, I mean, they were like, oh, we're going to reveal it. It's Henry Ducard. No, it's not. And so I think if they just introduced the idea that it could be the Arkham Knight in 1000, then that would that it would feel like another red herring. Like, especially if because when did she use this? 996. We still got 3 more issues before 1000. I have a funny feeling they're gonna keep asking who's behind this, and they'll probably keep throwing us red herrings. And so unless the idea of the Arkham Knight is introduced sooner, and then the identity is revealed in 1000. So I really hope we don't get a red herring in 1000.
That would not be good. But I don't see that happening. Kind of going back to what Steph was saying earlier about how these are definitely different and they're not connecting. I definitely agree. We've talked about that before, about how these books are definitely not connecting. And I think that's okay. Detective does not sell as well as Batman does, which means it hypothetically could reach a different audience. Batman does in fact reach a different audience that Detective Comics doesn't, because it sells more. So if it's selling 100,000 and Detective's only selling 60, well, there's 40,000 people that are buying the book that are not reading Detective, so it's already reaching a different type of audience. So I think that's perfectly fine. Something I want to talk about based off of this one. So we had the Henry Ducard stuff that happens. There's throwbacks and references to basically the entire storyline that Tomasi did with Morgan Ducard, which had Damian killing Morgan Ducard. We saw that, I only say I saw that because that just happened. The collected edition, a new collected edition, just released recently, and we reviewed it as part of TBU Collected. And it's interesting that there is this callback to something that happened during the New 52, because I honestly, outside of stuff that Snyder has done, I haven't seen a lot of callbacks to hardly anything from the New 52 from any creators. Obviously, Tomasi is more likely to call back his own stuff than somebody else's, but I do find it slightly interesting that he called back to that. But I guess, and that has nothing to do with my question, it was more of just a statement. But my other question is, we had Leslie, we had Alfred have stuff to happen, now we have had Ducard. There's these two moments at the end of the book with the Sensei, and also Mr. Miracle shows up, which I'm guessing we're going to get more of in the next issue. But I guess my question is, do you feel like Ducard didn't get enough time, or do you feel like there was too much time spent on him and not enough time spent on any of these other characters that appeared? Because it does feel very abruptly like they go from Ducard straight to the Sensei, and then they go straight to Mr. Miracle. Like, it feels like they are trying to get as many of these people in to show that there are multiple characters that are being attacked, even if they're outside the normal realm of characters we're typically seeing. So, to me, I'm wondering, do you guys feel like they're moving too quickly? I know Tony on the site said that there was no room, there was no time for mourning really of Leslie. They just go straight into, what's next? Let's solve this crime of who's attacking, which is in some ways the same thing that they were doing with Batman, because in Batman, he goes right after KG Beast instead of dealing with the fallout of Dick being shot in the head. Or they don't show it because, months had passed or whatever, but does it feel like it's just moving quickly, or are you okay with the way it's presented here?
Well, I mean, I feel like they did do a decent job. I mean, I choked up reading the last issue. I think they did spend a lot of time on saying goodbye to Leslie, so I don't think that needed to be in this issue. I think they did a good job in the last one. And with Alfred getting stabbed and the assailant getting away, there is a time crunch. There is a limited amount of time that he can go after this guy. I think it's a little too coincidental that Batman is visiting all these completely random, seemingly unconnected things, and the monster is either right ahead or right behind him. That seems a little weird. It almost makes me think that the monster is following Batman, so wherever he goes, whoever he's visiting is going to get hurt. Because I think it's way too coincidental. It's comics, it could be, but I think it's way too coincidental that Batman just happens to be where the monster is just about to be or has just been, unless he knows something, which he doesn't. I also didn't like that the only reason he went to go visit Henry Ducard was he thought he was the guy behind the attacks, and then it had nothing to do with him, really. And so all we got was a little history lesson, and then he died, and then Henry died. So I felt it was a little bit of a waste of time, other than an interesting history lesson, because, yeah, it sounded like, even though it was the New 52, it wasn't like the Batman and Robin or the because it sounded, didn't they talk about Batman Inc. too? Like, wasn't Batman Inc. kind of retconned out of the New 52? Or did this have nothing to do with it? In some
ways, basically, it still existed. They just changed some stuff. That's all. It was just basically, they kind of ignored it initially when the New 52 started, but they didn't finish telling the Batman Inc. story, and then there was a second volume of Batman Incorporated that released that featured more stories from it, but the rest of the books completely ignored it as if it didn't happen, but Grant Morrison
except
still
for Talon and Batman Eternal. Both of those had heavy tie-ins to Batman Inc.
Yeah.
So, I mean, it just seems, I don't know, it seemed a little bit of a waste of time, even though I appreciated the history lesson.
What was the question again?
Did you feel like it was moving too fast, or did you feel like the amount of time spent with each character made sense?
I think the only real problem in pacing I had, I think it was very well paced. I think it moved along at a good clip. I thought Morgan Ducard felt a little bit self-indulgent because we already basically went through the Ducard stuff at the beginning of Batman and Robin, and that was very good. And then we also did sort of a reprise of that with Robin, Son of Batman by Gleason, which is really excellent. I recommend Robin, Son of Batman for anyone who hasn't read it. Well, the first trade. And so this just sort of felt like, oh yes, it's that guy again. So I didn't think he needed to have more space. The biggest thing I had is the cliffhanger at the end of last issue where Batman turns out all the lights and is like, I'm the monster here. And then it turns out that he doesn't get any information. I was just like, that was a waste of time. So that was my only pacing comment. I think it's well paced. It's moving along.
Yeah, and just as a final note, I have been greatly enjoying the art on this series. I feel like with all of the consistent changes, because there's, just because Tom King is working with a bunch of different artists right now with different arcs, and with Nightmares, he's got basically somebody different almost on every single issue. It's nice to see some consistency. Doug Mankey's art is some really good stuff. It was also recently announced on Twitter that Brad Walker is going to be taking over Detective Comics on number 1001, and it looks like he's going to be on the book for probably a similar amount of time that Mankey has been on. Mankey's on from 994 to 1000, and Brad Walker is on at least 1001 and 1002, but he made a point to say that he's, coming on board and, going to be doing the art. So I'm assuming he's going to be on for at least 6 issues as well, which says that Tomasi's working pretty far in advance. If Mankey was able to keep up, and we've talked about this before, but if Mankey was able to keep up and, he doesn't require any fill-in artists or anything like that in the future, leading up to 1000, it means that Tomasi could, in fact, be working on stuff pretty far in advance, where Brad Walker has also been working on stuff well in advance, because he made a point to say that he was able to announce that he was working on Detective Comics, which means he's been working on it for quite some time. So, but I've enjoyed Mankey on the book, and it's nice to have just a little bit of consistency while Tom King has his humongous entourage of artists constantly switching it up. So that's nice.
I agree. I think that Mankey's art has been really good. I am a big fan of Brad Walker from what he did in Aquaman at the beginning of Rebirth. His Aquaman stuff was really strong, and so I think he'll be really great on Batman. Detective Comics, but drawing Batman, of course. I think that the way the different teams approach the double shipping has been really interesting. Tom King actually started doing full arcs, so David Finch did 5, and then Miguel Janin did 5, and they had like a fill-in between them. But I think that didn't work as well, so I think that Tom King has been switching art teams so much because he knows that shorter arcs are better for his writing style. So I actually think it's not just timing, but I think he also has gotten into a better rhythm with how he wants to tell a story, whereas Tomasi's doing a much more, this is the trade, this is the arc. And so I like that he's got this consistent art feel.
Yeah.
The changing artist for the Nightmares arc still, at this rate, looks like it makes sense, though, because they are so different that they're different dreams. So that's kind of like what it would be like if you were switching dreams in your head, is they wouldn't all be the same.
That's true, except for, I swear, when I have dreams, I never see anything in a different shade or way. It's just reality.
But are your dreams caused by like virtual reality or drugs?
That's true. I don't take a lot of drugs, or no, I don't take any drugs before I go to bed. But yeah. Okay, so Detective Comics, I'm going to give a total of 3.5 out of 5.
I agree, 3.5.
3 out of 5.
All right, and over on the site, Tony gave the issue a total of 3 out of 5 as well. So that's going to give Detective Comics a total of 3 out of 5 Batarangs. So that is all of our in-depth reviews. Let's head over to the site for Greater Gotham. Starting off on January 9th, we have main TBU books. We already talked about Batman number 62. Nightwing number 56, a fight with Scarecrow in the streets of Bloodhaven brings Rick into close contact with a team of Nightwings. Meanwhile, a mysterious observer lurks in the shadows. Suba Adil, he gave it 2 out of 5. I'm going to give this one a neutral.
I don't know. Thumbs up, I guess. I enjoyed it. It was weird, though.
Sorry, the book was again?
Nightwing.
Oh, thumbs down. So far down.
Harley Quinn number 57. Harley is hunted by Batman after he suspects her of trying to frame the Joker with a Smilex death. Meanwhile, Harley is the subject to the trials to become a galactic angel of retribution. This was reviewed by David. He gave it 2.5 out of 5. I'm going to give this one a thumbs down.
Oh, I feel so bad. Thumbs up.
Neutral.
Secondary TBU books, Archie meets Batman 66, number 6. Archie and Batman finally team up to defeat the dastardly villains who have taken over Riverdale. Ian reviewed this. He gave it 2.5 out of 5. I'm going to give this one a neutral.
Neutral, but thank God it's over.
I feel really bad because I really liked the first 3 issues.
I liked
think
the
those
first
were
two.
definitely thumbs up. But these last 3 issues are such a slog. There's no real exciting moments. It's just sort of point A to point B to point C. I really think it would have been better if they made them wrap up in 4 issues and just be like, this is a 4-issue mini, it's a trade. And I think it would have been punchier and more exciting. But as it is, I have to end on a neutral because it's just, I'm bummed.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. All right, Batman Kings of Fear number 6. Scarecrow may have dethroned Batman, but how will the Dark Knight respond? This is by Corbin. He gave it 4.5 out of 5. I'm going to give this one a thumbs up, despite the art.
Whoa, what?
Reluctant thumbs up.
What just happened?
No, to be
Thumbs
honest,
up.
I'm actually planning Kings of Fear number 6. I'm planning on doing a TBU extra for the $10 Patreon exclusive cast. But to further explain my thought process behind this, but I'll say this briefly. I'm still not a fan of Kelly Jones. The series is not making me a fan of Kelly Jones, but I think the story that they told was interesting.
It was. It's
I mean, Scott Peterson's a pro. He's a good writer, so...
Yeah, I don't think this is... Has it ever happened before that Batman's let himself be psychoanalyzed by one of the villains?
I mean, it's like 1,000 issues detective, maybe sometime in there.
Yeah, I'm sure it's happened sometime, but...
Oh, did I?
No,
I said thumbs up.
Oh, did I not? I said reluctant thumbs up.
Oh, reluctant. I thought you were just repeating me.
I'm not reluctant. I'm definitely thumbs up.
Main DC Universe books, Adventures of the Super Sons number 6. Damian and John tried to get a better handle on their alien surroundings. After surviving a night, they are attacked by Rex Luthor. The pair is ultimately saved, but still captured by Tommy Tomorrow. This is used by Bill. He gave it 4 out of 5. I'm going to give this one a neutral middle. I don't know. I want to say I'm enjoying the story, but I really wish it wasn't taking place in space. That's the only thing I wish. So I'll say thumbs up, trending to neutral.
Yeah, sort of the same, but thumbs up, and I totally get that this story is psycho.
Abstain.
Deathstroke number 39 is Doctor Strange reveals his part in the Deathstroke's last 3 weeks at Arkham. His family and friends converge on the asylum as well. This is by Ian. He gave it 3.5 out of 5. I'm going to give this one a thumbs up.
Thumbs up.
Thumbs up. This book is great.
Justice League number 15, the Justice League perform a heist on Thanagar Prime that unlocks the secrets of the universe. This is by Corbin. He gave it 4 out of 5. I'm going to give this one a thumbs up.
Abstain.
Young Justice number 1, drawn together by one extra-worldly threat. The classic Young Justice meets again, plus a few new additions. This is by Jessica. She gave it 4.5 out of 5. I'm going to give this one a thumbs up.
Thumbs up, and Bendis gets my blessing. He didn't ruin John. It was Connor, not John, in the comic. Spoilers! Of course, that just opens a whole new can of worms.
Thumbs up. It was a lot of fun. It's not necessarily for me, but it was a lot of fun.
Yeah, and if you want to hear more about Young Justice number 1, I did a TBU extra for this one as well. This one was actually done with Rob from Robin Never Loves the Drake, as well as a new show that he just launched called Everyone Loves Young Justice. We talked all about Young Justice number 1. That's also available to our Patreon supporters as well. Secondary DC Universe books, The Green Lantern number 3, Batman appears alongside the Justice League in the issue. Suicide Squad, Black Files number 3, Deadshot and Harley Quinn appear in the issue as well. Jumping over to January 16th, main TBU books. We already talked about Detective Comics. The Batman Who Laughs, number 2, while staving off the Joker toxin, Batman is shot trying to stop the Batman Who Laughs from collapsing Wayne Tower. This is reviewed by Tony. He gave it 4 out of 5 and give this one a thumbs up.
I went through all the emotions reading this book. Thumbs down, neutral, and then thumbs up. So I think overall I will give it a thumbs up. Even though I don't like the Batman Who Laughs.
This one's really hard for me to... I don't like what Scott Snyder is doing. I haven't for a long time. But Scott Snyder is an excellent writer, and Jock is an excellent artist. So this was much better than the first issue. I'm going to give this a neutral trending thumbs up.
Yeah, and I think we might be doing TBU extra for this one as well. This one and Kings of Fear are, I think, on my list of ones that I am interested in doing. Mostly because I too, as we talked about last episode, am sick of the Batman Who Laughs. I'm just sick of that character.
That dude just needs to go away.
Yeah, he does. But I would say that this issue was still very interesting. It had some really, really interesting points and, twists.
It was very well constructed. Yeah. The metaphor of the heart was really well done and coherent throughout the whole issue, which is why I was so hesitant, because I don't like what's going on, but it's really thoughtful and it's really effective.
Yeah.
And I like that he's not like a psychopath. Like last week I kind of lumped him in with Joker, but he is very different than Joker reading this. So
all right, Red Hood Outlaw number 30. After heading south of the border, Jason finds the tip he got from the clone Monday regarding the Solitary. Investigating an abandoned prison, Red Hood comes face to face with the head of the Underlife, the Solitary. This is by Bill. He gave it 3.5 out of 5. I'm going to give this one a neutral.
Thumbs up.
Thumbs up. It's trippy. It's interesting. It's kind of fun.
Catwoman number 7. Selena is still in Villa Hermosa, keeping an eye on her sister, but gets a visit from a Gotham rogue she knows all too well. This is by Jerry. He gave it 3.5 out of 5. I'm going to give this one a neutral.
Yeah, neutral. But we get more Penguin. It's your favorite.
So this is very well constructed. This is probably the best written issue that Joelle Jones has written so far.
Really?
I just don't care about this story. I have to go with neutral because I don't care, but it was well done.
I felt like the story didn't do anything this time other than Penguin landed in Villamosa and Catwoman went out for the evening.
Well, but there was like a real sense of tension and building and then sort of the confrontation. Like in terms of structure, it was just very well done. In terms of stuff happening that I cared about, it was pointless.
Yes. So, no secondary TBU books. Main DC Universe books, Justice League Dark, number 7. Man-Bat shares some of the team's experiences with the other kind. This is by Tony. He gave it 3 out of 5. I'm going to give this one a neutral.
Neutral, but if this had been the Halloween special, it would have gotten a thumbs up. I did not like this year's Halloween special. I like this much better.
Abstain.
Suicide Squad number 50 in the final issue of the series is the team must defeat the vets before they escape to the surface from an underwater Russian prison and infect the world. This was reviewed by Paul. He gave it 1.5 out of 5, and I give this a wonderful thumbs down.
Oh, I gave it a neutral just because it's over. Maybe I need to stop giving people benefit of the doubt for ending
that's like a
storyline.
sympathy neutral.
A sympathy neutral.
I'm giving it a thumbs down. I don't understand why this book deserved 50 issues. I don't understand that it was double shipping for this long. This book was trash, and it went on forever.
Yeah, it did.
Was this the final issue?
It was the final issue.
Oh, thank God.
But there's still a rumor that's been floating around since like May that Brian Azzarello is going to reboot this series at some point.
Gosh.
It might not be until the summer at this point.
It's going to be so much violence and sexual assault, and it's just going to be dark and gross and
Moving on, no secondary DC Universe books this time around. And then as far as TBU trades and hardcovers, we have Batman Shaman, New Edition trade paperback, Harley Quinn Rebirth, Deluxe Edition Book 3 hardcover, Injustice Gods Among Us Year 4, the Complete Collection trade paperback, Batwoman Volume 3, Fall of the House of Kane trade paperback, a very DC Valentine's Day trade paperback, and Scooby-Doo Team Up Volume 6 trade paperback. So if we gave a thumbs up, thumbs down, neutral rating to any of those books, we have detailed reviews of all those over on the site. I encourage you guys to check out all the reviews. There's new reviews posting every Wednesday, Thursday, and Friday, despite the fact that DC is bringing the count of Bat books to potentially an all-time low, as I've discussed on past episodes. I say that because this upcoming week, this past week, we only had 6 issues, but this upcoming week, I think we only have like 4 or 5.
I think, yeah.
Yeah, there's not much. It's bewildering. It's crazy. This is like insane. I've never had this little amount of books for the site to cover, so it's kind of crazy. But anyway, we have reviews posted up every single week of all the books that pertain to the TBU or to the Batman universe and what we discuss here. So be sure to check out those reviews. And if you do check out those reviews and you have comments, you can leave comments specifically on those posts on the site, and those posts will be, the writers of the reviews will actually be able to answer any questions you have about the series, or they might be, if you have a theory, they might be able to, chat with you about the theory. I also encourage you to join the Discord, because there's always conversations going on about all the books all the time, not just, when a new title comes out, but obviously when a new title comes out as well. So definitely check out all those other options as well. All right, so before we jump into our comments from the last episode, I want to quickly thank our Patreon supporters. Thank you, Robert, Stephanie, Brandon, Ian, Anthony, Arturo, Irwin, Brian, J. Dutton, Real No Deuces, and Donald, as well as the people also supporting us at the lower levels as well. We greatly appreciate your support. We really do appreciate your support. And it was brought to my attention that I've not really done a real good job of explaining what exactly you get. So I'm going to take just a quick moment to tell you exactly what you get. So right now we have 3 tiers available for you to support at. A $3 tier, which allows you to get your name added to the Bat Fan Appreciation page, which is found on the site. If you have ever clicked on the Show Your Support for TBU, that is where you will see your name posted as a blatant thank you for supporting us. You'll also be able to participate in Patreon exclusive polls that in helping decide to certain discussion points or comic spotlights in the future. And you'll also receive 2 exclusive episodes of TBU Raw, which is a shorter podcast. Generally, I say shorter because the intent was it was always around 10 minutes, but it never is. Sometimes it's as long. I mean, we've had ones I think as long as like 60 minutes. It's insane how long some of them are. But anywhere between 10 to generally, I'd say 10 to 30 minutes about a random topic. So like just in the last couple weeks, some of the episodes that have actually posted, we had a TBU Raw related to DC on Comixology. We also talked about Aquaman. We also had one for the questionable marketing of the DC Universe. And we also talked about Batwoman on CW. So those were some possibilities of things you could hear. And even if you support now, you'll still be able to hear that back catalog of content as well. So if you have a bunch of time on your hands, you want a bunch of stuff to listen to, you can listen to the entire back catalog of all the content we have to offer there as well. At the $10 tier, this allows you to get a shout out, obviously, here on the Comic Cast. You also get the episodes of TBU Raw, which we already mentioned. You also get an additional 2 episodes of TBU Extra, which is where we review extra comics. So specifically, like I said, in the last couple of weeks, we did Young Justice #1. We also did the CW Elseworlds crossover event. We did the Batman Annual last month. We did Red Hood and the Outlaws back in November. It changes up. Originally I was planning on just sticking strictly to the comics, but I've realized that it also makes sense to do some media stuff as well. So we also have one coming very soon for Titans Season 1, the entire season of Titans we talk about. So lots of different stuff there. Those are 2 additional, so you'll get 4. If you support at the $10 level, you'll be getting 4 episodes, totaling at least, I would say, at least an hour and a half of extra content every single month, as well as an entry into a quarterly prize package. We've had 2 of them. You can actually see the posts even without supporting, just to see what we've had to offer. A bunch of different stuff. Last quarter, we actually had 2 prize packages because we had a prize donated to us. But we had a big giant Batman statue that was like 18 inches tall. That was one prize package, and then the other one was a graphic novel, a Blu-ray set, a Batman VR set, and a Batman or a Gotham City 4-dimensional puzzle. There's a lot of stuff. This time around, we have some things. It'll be revealed shortly. I haven't narrowed down exactly. I have a big box of stuff that's been sent to me of stuff that we're going to be using. So we're going to be revealing that shortly. And then finally, there's a $20 tier level, and this is basically the level that you would want to support at if you want the Comic Cast earlier than everybody else. You will get the raw, unedited versions of the Comic Cast potentially up to 6 days before anybody else. You also, after you support at that level for 3 months consecutively, you'll be able to get an exclusive TBU shirt that's not available in the merch store. So, and you'll be able, and if you continue to support after 3 months, you'll get multiple shirts. So if you support for 6 months, you'll get 2 shirts. If you get support for 9 months, you'll get 3 shirts. So every 3 months, we'll send you a message and say, you get a shirt. What's your size, and verify your address, and you'll get a free shirt sent to you directly. So those are the tiers we have. There's something for everybody. And obviously, if you don't want anything whatsoever, or you want to just give $1 a month, that's completely acceptable as well. There's an option where you can choose no reward and just donate whatever amount you want to per month as well. So definitely check that out if you haven't. So with that being said, and of course, if you don't have a way to support us, and I've said this before, obviously, but if you don't have a way to support us financially, we're always looking for people to join TBU as staff. We're always looking for news writers and audio editors and video editors, graphic designers. If you have any of those talents, or know anybody with those talents that are fans of Batman that would be interested in working with us, we're always looking for people to volunteer their time to make TBU a bigger community and to basically share our love for Batman with even more fans. So be sure to get in touch with me. As I said also on the last episode, we are looking for more comic book reviewers. Even though we have less comics coming out, we're looking at adding just a couple more people to our group of reviewers, so that way we can even things out a little bit more, and then prepare for what eventually is, I'm guessing, an onslaught of new Bat books coming in the summer. I don't know. I'm just taking a wild guess because it seems like we're at like an all-time low at this point. But if you are interested in reviewing comics, we do supply you with the comics to review. So if you are interested in that or anything else that I mentioned, you can email me at tbu@thebatmanuniverse.net, or you can private message me, direct message me, wherever you feel comfortable contacting us, and I'll get back in touch with you. So with that is that. We're going to dive straight into our comments, because we got a ton of them and I want to get through them.
Boy, did you get a wrong number. Leave your message at the sound of the shriek. No, please, don't!
The first one comes from ACN via Discord.
ACN says, has there ever been an ongoing series focusing on a Batman villain, not a limited mini or one-shot? I'm aware of the Dixon Bane series, Penguin mini, and the Villains Month for the New 52. Does Harley Quinn even count as a villain? I've never read any of her books, and if not, why not, do you think? Batman's Rogues Gallery is the best there is, with only Spider-Man giving him a run for his money. Wouldn't a villain book running parallel to Batman or Detective, but showing the villain side of the story be neat? If this has been done, please fill us in. I'd love to read it. Thanks.
So, there's a couple of things here. So, first off, I want to start off by saying the first one that I immediately thought of was the exact same one that Chris from Bat Books for Beginners chimed in with and mentioned on the Discord. He mentioned the Joker series from the 70s. Now, a lot of people don't even know that it was ongoing because it only lasted, I believe, 7 issues. But it was supposed to be an ongoing at the time. So that was the first one I thought of. But then I thought, well, here's the thing. It depends on what your classification of villains are. So I have my comics organized in a very specific manner. I have all Batman comics. I have all Ally comics, like all of the sidekicks and things like that, and the team books. And then I have all of the villains, and it's all separated very differently in my collection. But the way I classify it is as I consider Catwoman a villain because that's generally what she's considered, is a villain, even though right now, currently in continuity, she's not. And Catwoman has actually had 3 different ongoings over time, and now 4 with the newest series. But even if you don't count Catwoman, and I guess you don't want to count Harley Quinn, because Harley Quinn did have an ongoing in 2000, and she had another one, obviously, during the New 52, and now another one in Rebirth. If you don't count Harley Quinn or the Joker series, or you don't count Red Hood, because Red Hood technically has been a bad guy, too.
And it was called Red Hood and the Outlaws. I mean...
That's true. That's true. If you don't count any of those, and you don't count any of the minis, the only other ongoing that I can think of was Gotham City Sirens, which, again, still technically includes characters that some people would consider not villains, or at least live in that gray area. But Gotham City Sirens was an ongoing. It only ended because the New 52 came about, and that one was focused around Catwoman, Harley Quinn, and Poison Ivy. And Riddler also appeared very much so in that series as well. But that was probably the one that, if you're not counting Catwoman, the Joker one, Harley Quinn, or any of the other mini series, then that's what you're left with. But I'm positive I've said in the past that having a villain series would be very interesting and would be good. I know that they've done miniseries. The Poison Ivy one, which was Poison Ivy Cycle of Life and Death from 2016, I enjoyed that. I thought it was a good series. I also enjoyed Penguin Pain and Prejudice, which was back from 2011. I enjoyed both of those. I didn't really enjoy the Bane Conquest as much as maybe I could have, but it was good. I didn't enjoy it as much as probably some people had. So I think sometimes the series that they have, the miniseries, is a nice, easy way of saying, let's find a creator who has a good story, and they tell their story, and it's collected in a nice little trade paperback at the end of the day. But I think that the ongoing is something that DC has a hard time wrapping their head around. I know even with Harley Quinn getting her own series in the New 52, which it wasn't at the beginning of the New 52 either, though it was later on, even that seemed like out of nowhere and something very different. And if it was really just because DC had no choice but to accept the popularity of Harley Quinn and kind of hunker down and say, we might not want this, but we're going to make it happen because we've got to make some money. So that's my only thought on that. I agree that a villain series or more villain series could be great. There's another comment real quick that I want to go over, which was a reply from Matches Malone on Discord.
Well, can you hold on the Matches Malone one? Because I want to comment on ACN before we get to Matches Malone.
Yes, that's fine.
So, Gotham City Sirens is the one example I can think of a direct Batman villain being involved in an ongoing series. Most of them are, as Dustin says, miniseries. And I think that's because, in general, there's no appetite at DC for, or I think in the market or creators, for a pure villain ongoing. Every time they try a villain ongoing, like Suicide Squad or Deathstroke, which aren't strictly Batman villains but always have a Batman element, they almost always turn into either an anti-hero series. Like, we've had 4 Deathstroke series, and only one of them is a villain book. Marv Wolfman, that's definitely anti-hero. Kyle Higgins and Rob Liefeld, that definitely tended into anti-hero. Tony Daniel was 100% anti-hero. Only Christopher Priest is kept in a villain. And even he actually had an arc where he was heroic, and then he went evil again. Spoilers, by the way, for a year-old comic. Suicide Squad is an interesting case, because it's villains forced to do good. So it's a really brilliant concept, and as much as I hate on the current run, I can't understand why they don't hire John Ostrander. Dude's still around, dude's still writing. Get the man back on Suicide Squad, it would probably be better than what you got. But I just don't see an appetite in the fandom for a villain doing villainous things on an ongoing basis. I think a villain pulling off a really cool heist or a really cool murder or something for a standalone is a cool plot. I have no desire to read that for years.
Yeah, because I think inside of us, like, we want our comic book people, to make the right choices. Like, if you've ever read or watched, like I mentioned a few weeks ago, Avatar: The Last Airbender, you instantly fall in love with Zuko, even though he's a bad guy, and you just keep wondering why he keeps making bad choices. And so, his storyline is just so interesting, but because, of his evolution through the story. And so having just a book about someone who has to stay a villain and therefore can't change is just a frustrating story to read.
It takes a really high-level writer.
Yes. Yeah, it would definitely take some skill. Yeah.
That also is most of the time why most of the series that are based around villains turn into anti-hero type stuff too as well.
So one of the reasons I stopped watching The Americans is because it's a story about these Russian spies in America, and they stay Russian spies, and they keep doing Russian spy things, and it's like, okay, there's only so much of your bad decision making I can take before I
watched
go crazy.
The first episode of that. I was like, there's a whole 7 seasons of this? Why am I watching
It was good. I watched all 7 seasons.
Did you? Oh, I stopped after
I'm sure it's very well done.
It is very well done.
I'm not on board.
No. I had to stop. Should I continue?
Yes, so go ahead. Let's go to the Max
Malone
comment.
He said, I'd be interested in a limited series that follows a henchman from first crime up through the working for the big bads. Each issue would end with Batman breaking things up. Could also touch on why these henchmen sign up for this, the broader community of henchmen, how they get recruited, etc. This series could culminate with him about to do something really over the line, maybe for the Joker, and trying to tip off Bats because he wants to be stopped. Would sort of have a Gotham Central feel. Bats is there, but only from their perspective.
And that's an excellent idea. I would honestly say that something like that is probably one of the few ways it could work, especially since it seems like Ian was saying, generally speaking, there's not a lot of writers who have like long stories for each villain. Like, there's not a villain that's like, oh, I could write this character forever. The Harley Quinn stuff is just very zany, not very villain-like in most cases, so it's entirely possible for them to just keep telling crazy stories that have nothing to do with being a villain. But if you had something where it was like a henchman, and the henchman worked with a variety of different villains, and you got like these arcs, and the henchman was like the through line of the series, but really it was just a collection of different stories related to villains, it would be really cool.
Have you guys ever heard of Rooster Teeth?
Yeah.
No.
Rooster Teeth is a
They're
production
the guys who do
Oh, I've heard.
Yes, I've heard of them. So they're famous for doing, and that's how they got into their business, is they started Red vs. Blue, which is a web series using the Halo engine as a storytelling device. And they also do some shorts. And so one of the shorts they did a few years ago was called, I think it was just called like The Batman Henchman or something. It was about this guy that keeps working for Batman villains, and he keeps getting the plots that he's working for keeps getting stopped, and he keeps getting beaten up by Batman, and it just follows his life and how he finally gets out of working for villains, but Batman still suspects him because he was one of the henchmen, and so he comes to his home and beats him. It's hilarious. He beats him up, and it's worth a watch. If you're craving a story about a Batman villain, that is 10 minutes of your life. That's 5 minutes. 5 minutes of your life. That's worth.
I also want to recommend two series: Streets of Gotham by Paul Dini and illustrated by Dustin Nguyen. It is a sort of Batman and Bat Family series, but it also really looks at the villains. We talked about Jenna Duffy, the carpenter. She was created in that series, and the broker, the guy who finds hideouts for villains, like this infrastructure that Paul Dini created for the villains is I think that's the kind of richness you're looking for in this Henchman series. Other series I want to mention is called Manhunter by Mark Andreyko. It was in the mid-2000s, like 2004 to 2009-ish. And the reason I mention is because it's about a sort of anti-hero. It's sort of like the Huntress. She's a vigilante who kills villains because she's tired of the system failing. But she actually hires a tech guy who was a henchman for many people in Gotham. And his last job, before he started working for her, was with as a henchman for the Joker. And so you get flashbacks, and you get his life coming back to haunt him as to how he's working on the good side, but he used to be working on the bad side. So both of those series really develop that sort of street-level perspective of the supervillains that really give the universe depth. And I really wish there was something comparable in today's stories. The closest we got was Batman Eternal, because that was a weekly series. You really got into the nitty-gritty of all the villains. But even that didn't quite get down to the street level a lot of times.
All right, so hopefully there's some suggestions there for you to check out if you haven't found something. All right, our next comment comes from Corbin, also from Discord.
Says, I tend to make musical playlists for characters to gain more understanding of their personality, but strangely, I have a hard time with Bruce. So, what music do you think Bruce listens to? Also, you guys need a segment called Let's Get Nuts, just so you can play that drop.
You want to get nuts? Come on, let's get nuts. Because I just wrote a song about how I'm going to kick all your butts.
Stop him before he starts singing!
And it'd make a good shirt.
It would make a good shirt. I'm already thinking about that. We were talking earlier about how we could actually incorporate that into the show, so that we could make the shirt make sense for the show. Working on that. As far as music, I'm going to say that if he listens to anything, it's classical. That's the only thing I could think of. I don't really think that... I mean, like, in all honesty, he probably doesn't listen to any music. But I feel like if he does listen to music, it would probably be classical or opera music or something like that. But I feel like I'm swayed with that thought just because of what we've seen in... just because that's considered more high-class type music, and also because we've seen opera and classical stuff happen in some of the incarnations of Batman in the past.
I was about to say that. I was going to be a little more specific and say he probably really likes Vivaldi. As depressing of music as you can get. And he probably doesn't listen to Simple Plan.
Do you ever feel like breaking down? Do you ever feel out of place? Like somehow you just don't belong and no one understands you?
I can't imagine him being that emo, but the definitely the high class emo music like Vivaldi is probably his jam. And also, I mean, let's not forget he has a whole soundtrack, the Batman Lego soundtrack. Darkness, no parents. He probably listens to it.
I 100% agree with Steph and Dustin. I think that as a billionaire who had parents who had very high-class tastes, I think. And Alfred. I mean, can you see Alfred doing anything but listening to classical? Dude probably plays the violin in his spare time. So I think that Batman definitely would have a taste for some classical. I personally would push him more towards the 20th century, things like Bartók. And Mahler. Because I think the edginess of the more modernist harmony would appeal to sort of his brokenness a bit more. But I think he'd also appreciate things like Beethoven. And Chopin. And some of the more romantic composers who really dealt with pain in their work. The other thing is I've actually talked to a lot of people who were very intelligent and very driven, and they're really into rap. So I could see Batman, especially when working out, having some rap going. Not like pop rap, but like really hardcore stuff that really had anger in it and had a drive and had a lot of intelligence in the lyrics.
As I walk through the valley of the shadow of death, I take a look at my life and realize there's nothing left. Cause I've been blasting and laughing so long that even my mama thinks that my mind is gone.
In terms of the rhymes.
So you don't see him lifting weights to the real Slim Shady?
Well, I'm back. Fix it,
I don't know enough about Eminem to say. I don't actually listen to rap myself. This is my experience with other people who do listen to rap.
All right. So hopefully that answers that question. Next comment comes from, again, ACN on Discord.
He says, Dustin, why aren't you looking forward to Abnett? Is that right? Abnett?
Yep.
Also, with only 2 books being reviewed per podcast, have you considered reviewing Nightwing, Red Hood, Batgirl, etc., like you did with the podcast when it first started? And if not, why did you get away from reviewing those books? Time factor? Also, the sound quality sounds better this episode. Did something change?
So, let me first off by saying the sound, that's on Steph. Steph, did you change something?
Not really. I will say that we've had a couple of technical issues lately with, I think, some of the tracks came in a little funky, so we had to use the backup track for some episodes, and Ian records when we talk to Ian. You use your phone, right? So that sometimes gets recorded when we use the backup recording. But when I get the actual files, everyone has wonderful mics and it all sounds really good. So it's just a matter of how the recording goes, and if people have a lot of stuff going on in their background or something.
Yeah, which tends to be a lot of the case with me. For those of you who don't know, I have 3 small children. Well, not small. One of them's, I've got a 2-year-old, a 4-year-old, and an 8-year-old. And literally every time I'm recording a podcast, they decide they're gonna run around the house. And in their defense, that's all they ever do. It's not like they're specifically doing it when I record a podcast, but that's literally all that happens. And then I've got a dog who will bark at anything that moves in my front yard or rings the doorbell or anything like that. So there's always stuff that happens, and any of the banging that you hear, that's always on my track, because I am unfortunately in a room that has no sound proofing whatsoever. I mean, the one thing I always wanted to do was to make a small room to record in, but that's just not possible with where I'm living. So yeah, I mean, maybe eventually I'll do something like that, but at this point it's more of I just have to suck it up, and I guess the listeners have to suck up listening to my kids stomp around on the floor. So that's that. Going back to the first question about why am I not looking forward to Abnett, very simple. I'm not super familiar with Abnett's work outside of Titans. That is literally the only series I've ever read that he has done. Didn't really... It's not that I didn't enjoy it, but I didn't enjoy it. It's very simple. Titans has been a book that has floundered for me for quite some time. At the beginning of Rebirth, it was there. It happened. Dick was on the team, so we covered it. But it doesn't feel like it has a purpose most of the time. It just feels like, well, some of these characters don't have anywhere else to go, so we're going to put them in this book, and then we're going to put characters that you do know that already have their own title, or they're already in another title in here as well, and we're going to tell stories involving other random characters from the universe that are not appearing anywhere else. And the thing is, like, I don't feel like there's a purpose. We were promised a purpose at the beginning of Justice League, where Scott Snyder came on the title and they relaunched it, and they promised a purpose with Titans, but I think that got torpedoed by Tom King having Dick Grayson shot in the head, and then Dick Grayson needed to be taken off the team when he was the team leader, and then the book having to basically address that change, and now it's gone in a completely different direction. And as you're listening to this, you'll be finding out that Titans is canceled as of April, so that's happening too. So why am I not looking forward to Abnett? Let me be clear, not all that's his fault. The majority of that's probably not his fault. He's probably just doing what he has to do to tell stories. But I just, when he was on the title, I just didn't feel like it was anything of worth, noteworthy. It was just there. So having him come on Justice League Odyssey, whatever. It's just, he's just going to do what he's done, what I've seen him do, which is just tell stories. And the thing is, like, I know that he previously, I think he worked on Aquaman, and my understanding is that the stuff that he did on Aquaman was good. I don't read Aquaman, so I couldn't tell you, but just based off of what I've known from him working on Titans, I don't really see... I'm not really interested in the entire concept of what Justice League Odyssey is in the first place, because I don't feel like there is a concept. It's just a group of characters that are thrown together, just like Titans, and we're not really getting anything except for, well, they're the space team. But there's already this space team. It's called the Green Lantern Corps. Do I really need another team? I don't think so. I don't read the Green Lanterns.
Well, so. I do want to point something out from solicits in the upcoming issues. So James Tynion had a couple of threads that he dropped just because his run got cut short from Detective Comics, and one of them was Azrael. Specifically, Azrael has a robot that is basically his arch nemesis, and it's pretty clear from solicits that that's going to be a major plotline in an upcoming thing. And as an Azrael fan, I know Dustin's not an Azrael fan,
definitely not.
I'm an Azrael fan. I'm very excited to see that plot picked up again. I am disappointed. I've been saying I love Carmine Di Giandomenico, and he was slated to be artist on the upcoming Justice League Odyssey. Looks like he's just a fill-in, which is really a shame, because he's such a good artist. He should be on an ongoing. He was on ongoing for Flash, and they haven't given him a new ongoing. They should. He's a top-level artist. But that's my little rant. I think there is an ongoing plot, and I think Abnett is a good choice to do it because his stuff on Silencer was quite solid. I do think that his Titan stuff was kind of goofy, but that was a lot of editorial interference.
Yeah, so that's why I'm not looking forward to Abnett. But your other question about why do we only review 2 books, or have we ever considered bringing Nightwing, Red Hood, or any of the other books that we previously reviewed back? Well, it comes down to just a couple of things. We got away from reviewing those books specifically because the length of time that previously the episodes was insanely long. And I mean insanely long. In some cases, some of the episodes were 3-4 hours long because we were reviewing so many books. And here's the thing, and there was a discussion about it on the Discord about, well, some of the episodes were about the same length, and that's true. Some of them were, but it was a number of different factors that made us stop covering all those extra books. Part of it was there was a lot of books that were just really bad, and talking about, 75% of the books that we talk about every episode, if they're bad, it just brings the entire cast down. Not to mention, we were getting a gazillion comments reviews on iTunes saying that we were just a bunch of negative Nancys who couldn't stop talking about how bad everything was. But it was bad. There was no way around it. There was bad stuff. There was some good stuff, which was mostly Snyder and Tomasi, but most of it was really bad. And it didn't matter that it was bad. People expected us to somehow make bad stuff sound good, which is very difficult to do. And it's also very disconcerting when you have got people telling you, hey, these books that are so bad, why do you keep saying they're so bad? Stop saying they're so bad. Now talk more about them, please. It's really annoying. So we stopped because they were really bad and we couldn't keep talking about them. But then, of course, I subjected myself to even more punishment by creating an extra podcast, which was previously known as the Point 5 Cast, which was Ed and myself reviewing all of those secondary books, all of the Nightwing, Batgirl, Red Hood, all of those titles. But that was even more of a punishment because then it was literally nothing but an hour and a half to 2 hours of us talking about all of the utter junk that was going on at the time. And again, there was a couple of bright moments here and there, but not enough to warrant continuing that. So eventually we just stopped. And then we kind of reformatted the idea of what the Comic Cast was. We really wanted to start focusing more on longer reviews, more in-depth reviews, discussing it more. A lot of the earlier reviews that we did when the Comic Cast first started, we didn't even talk about a book for more than 6-7 minutes. And I'm talking synopsis and talking a review, actually reviewing the book. If you go back to some of the very, very early episodes, and I only know this because earlier this year when we did the 250th episode, I went back and I looked through the older episodes, and it was insane how many books we were doing in a specific amount of time. And it was just because we weren't talking that much about them. It was very, this was good, that was bad, this was good, and that was bad, and that's basically what we were doing. It's hard to believe that in some cases we were reviewing 6 books, covering the news, covering listener comments, and still being able to get the entire episode out in less than an hour, which is nuts. That's insane. And it's not because we hacked it up and took out a bunch. It was literally we just didn't have that much to say because we were really unexperienced in discussing comics. I'm not going to sit here and try to claim that I'm the best comic book reviewer in the world. I'm certainly not. I find it very difficult sometimes to talk about the art because it's not something that I'm really informed with. But I really do enjoy talking about the writing and the story aspects of things, which is partially why we focus so heavily on stories and writing so often. But and I know that also for a fact that I'm not the best reviewer in general, and this whole podcast in general was kind of thrusted upon me and has spun into this big giant there's no way I could ever get out from under because it's just too successful and too great, and I enjoy being part of the community. But it is really, really something that I could probably talk way more about merchandise, even though, like I said, I don't collect a ton. I could talk tons about movies. I could talk about the stories in the comics, but I don't claim to be some sort of expert. I've been around for a long time. I've been a fan for a long time, but I am in no way an expert. So narrowing down what we focus on was a very big priority for us when we reformatted, and Ed came to the Comic Cast and Stella was with me, and it was the three of us, and it was the three of us for a really long time. We were still doing about the same number of books too, as 2 books per episode, because we were doing just the Bat books, which at the time was Batman and Robin, The Dark Knight, Batman and Detective Comics. But the idea of covering more, sure, we've talked about it. We've talked about maybe doing extra episodes here or there, but it really just comes down to time. Not so much the time of how long these podcasts turn out, but more of how much time can I dedicate towards things and how much time can other people dedicate. It might seem pretty simple to schedule out 2-3 hours to record a podcast, twice a month. That's on top of everything else, which I've listed in great detail in past episodes about everything that goes on. So doing that, it's difficult. So one of the solutions for that was there are books that come out that we do want to talk about or that people want us to talk about. So that was part of the reason why we came up with TBU Extra for the Patreon supporters, where I do dedicate at least time twice a month for us to review at least 2 of the books that came out over the month, and we do talk about some of those. Or in some cases, some other TBU related stuff, but it has mostly been comics since we started TBU Extra. I think just this past month there was just 2 with Titans and the CW Elseworlds crossover that we discussed stuff that wasn't just the comics, but generally we do a lot of those other comics. Will we ever bring more comics back to the Comic Cast? It's entirely possible. I can wholeheartedly say that it probably won't happen if I'm still a host. And I'm not saying that in like a negative sense, but if I was to step down from the Comic Cast and somebody was to step up and kind of head the show instead of myself, and they wanted to do more comics, that would be their incentive to do that because that's what they want to do. Personally, I don't want to add any more comics because I want to focus on the Bat books specifically. I feel like with Greater Gotham, we do focus on at least brief mentions of everything else that's happening in the other books, which is why we introduced that segment. But I also am very bad about long-winded talks, as you've heard for the last 5 minutes I've been talking. So I take up a lot of time. So if there was somebody who was more concise with their thoughts and they came on board and they could manage more books, then more power to them. But probably not as I'm the host of this show. So unfortunately, I hope that answers your question.
I would also like to add that I think that our current format is really solid. I've listened to some of those old casts and the community was great, but in terms of like actual content, in terms of like adding to my understanding of the books, I didn't get a ton out of it. Just because, if you only spend 2 to 5 minutes talking about a book, there's only so much you can say. I really think that the deep dives that we do on the books now are really good. I put a lot of thought into what I'm saying, and I know Steph and Dustin also put a lot of thought into that. If you want us to talk about books, if you're a patron, of course, go ahead and send us a message on the Patreon about like a book you want to see on the Extra, and we always take those into account because you're the reason the site exists. But if you just want like some comments, if you ask us about a book in the comments, we'll answer the comments. Yes. We're doing it right now, so it won't be a full review, but you'll get that conversation going if you ask about a specific book.
Yeah, if you have a specific question, like let's say, for example, like what do you think of James Jr. popping up at the end of Batman Who Laughs? We will discuss that because that's something that you ask. So if there's something specific that you want to hear our thoughts on, by all means. Don't expect a deep dive into the book, but we can certainly answer certain questions that you ask about titles. If there's something that you're reading right now and you're not understanding, if it's something that we're reading, we can certainly help you understand exactly what's going on. Or if you are a newer reader out there and you are completely lost and you need guidance of what direction to go, the best thing to do, I would suggest joining the Discord, because there's all kinds of people who can chime in besides just the 3 of us. But obviously you could leave a comment and we can get to your comments as well. So yeah. Also,
I'm on the Discord and I talk a lot there. So if you have questions, you'll probably get an answer from me.
Yes.
I also say, since we got this comment, I have been thinking about sort of chiming in if I have anything quick to say during our thumbs up, thumbs down, which you may have noticed this episode. We had some nice little conversations. It's not going to ever be as in-depth as long as the format stays the same, and I am in favor of the format staying the same as well as Dustin. But I think the idea of just adding a comment, adding to the community is a good one. So we're definitely listening to you guys.
All right.
It is fun, though, to go through the old episodes and hear the evolution of the show and how not only does the discussion get better, but the show becomes more organized and more streamlined and stuff. And it is fun to listen to the old episodes, but also be thankful that some of those don't exist anymore.
Well, they still exist.
Well, I mean, the show isn't like that anymore.
But yes, definitely agree. And obviously you've heard the evolution of my isms over the years as well. So, our last comment comes from Christian.
We need more of the history, man. I want you to say it.
Our last comment comes from Christian, who, as he points out, has been a longtime fan of the podcast, but he's actually been a longtime fan of the podcast for many, many years. I know exactly who Christian is because I met him at C2E2 years ago. So, let's get into his comment.
He says, "Hi guys, longtime fan of the podcast. Thanks for doing it all these years. I had a question that I've been meaning to ask for a couple of years now, but waiting for DC to address it, but they haven't. Who's in charge of the Batman universe and its direction? Where do you think Batman is headed for this new era starting in Tech 1000? And where do you want the universe to go?" Should I keep reading, or do you want...
just keep going. Okay.
From 2006 to 2011, Free Flashpoint, it was Morrison. 2011 to 2016, Snyder, New 52. And 2016 to present, Rebirth, it's King/Tomasi, Tech 1000 and beyond. And John's Batman in Doomsday Clock about a year from now. So if Jeff Johns' Batman in Doomsday Clock is supposed to be what all these writers are leading to, a Batman who is hunted and hated like never before. Plus, I heard Snyder has plans for the Batman Who Laughs and the Grim Knight in an upcoming Batman-centered Justice League/DC summer event this year. And just to make this more interesting, Bendis is probably planting seeds for his inevitable run in the next few years, probably after King's Run. Looking forward to your thoughts and theories.
Okay, so despite the fact that this comment literally came in like an hour before we started recording, it's a great question. There's a couple things here. There's nobody in charge of the books right now. I would say King probably has the most sway right now because he has done multiple things in his run that has affected other titles. We had Catwoman spin out of the events of Batman number 50. We had Nightwing basically give up being Nightwing because of things that happened in Batman because he got shot. We've had Nightwing leave the Titans team because he was shot in Batman. So King clearly has a lot of pull and sway about what happens to some of these characters. At the same time, when you look at Tomasi and Detective Comics, Tomasi's a big writer, probably not as big of a name of a writer as Tom King currently. Like right now, on paper, King is selling more, is more, is more well known than Tomasi. Tomasi's clearly been around for much longer in DC Comics and the Batman universe and things like that. His time goes all the way back to before Flashpoint. So he could have some pull too. We talked about this a little bit in the last episode about how currently there are two different editors for the Bat books. There's nobody really leading the Bat books. Jamie Rich is doing half the Bat books with Tom King's Batman, and then Chris Conroy is doing Detective Comics and another half of the Bat books, along with other titles as well. So the thing is, because it feels disjointed at this point, because there's not one clear direction. Tomasi, as we were talking about earlier, Tomasi clearly is not hinging his story on whatever King is doing currently in his own title. And I think that's perfectly fine at this point, but it would feel better if it was somehow more cohesive. But then again, I don't necessarily want Tomasi to fall in line with what King's doing. And King is certainly not going to fall in line with what Tomasi's doing because Tomasi just started. You would expect there to be some sort of new era after number 1000, but I don't see it happening. And it's just the reality of it. Right now, Batman's selling well. King is on the book for at least another year and a half before, he ends his 100-issue run or whatever. So the thing is, I don't see that much changing. Tomasi will probably be on Detective Comics at least 2 years, maybe longer, but I would imagine he's probably going to be on the book for at least 2 years, and he'll tell his own stories, and there might be stuff that spins out of Tomasi's stories as well, but there's just not somebody who's really in charge of it, and a lot of it just has to do with the editors. Because there's two editors, there's going to be two different directions for the books at any given time. When you look back at Snyder being kind of the one in charge of the New 52, that was because Mark Doyle was in charge of the Bat books for most of that time frame. And before that, it was Mike Martz. And Mike Martz was in charge of the Bat books and all of the books that came out along with it, which is why the stuff that Morrison did all fell in line with the other stuff. The same reason why when Mark Doyle was in charge of the Bat books and Snyder did something, there was all the other Bat books coincided with the crossovers and things like that. It's because everything's cohesive. You're not seeing that because the Bat book department per se is not a cohesive unit at this point. And it probably is not going to change until King is off the book. And it's really just because ultimately it came down to King wanted a different editor and got his own editor of his choice, but ultimately the other books were, doing their own thing. So that's that. As far as what Johns is doing, don't even think about that at this point, because who knows whenever that's going to wrap up and how it's all actually going to have anything to do with it, or if it's going to have anything to do with it at all, because at this point, because it's been delayed so much, there's no way that any writer out there that was originally pitched the idea of Doomsday Clock and said, this is how it's all going to end, this is where we're all going to meet up and say this is the end of the story. There is absolutely no way that any writer who's currently on a book is still doing that plan because of how much that book has been delayed. Talking about Snyder and the Batman Who Laughs and Grim Knight, I've heard about this massive crossover coming in, or not crossover, but the event coming for Justice League in the summer. Snyder's been talking about it a lot on Twitter recently. I have no idea what he's going to do, but if it is, it's going to focus solely on that little aspect of the Batman Who Laughs series, and it's not going to really have any pull probably on the other titles. It certainly will have pull on the other Justice League titles because they're all supposed to be grouped together, and for the most part, Justice League Dark, Justice League Odyssey, well, not Titans because that'll be gone, but presumably Teen Titans will be looped in with that stuff because those were all supposed to be part of this new group of the Justice books. So that's that. Bendis, yeah. At this point, I think it's a pretty foregone conclusion that he is going to take over after King. I mean, if he doesn't, then I would see him taking over after Tomasi, because eventually, I imagine, there's no way he does not eventually get onto a Bat book that's not a Walmart exclusive 12-page story every month. So
I haven't been able to pick those up. Are they any good?
Individually? No, not really. Overall, it's not
They are very pretty. Nick Darrington's art is amazing. The stories are completely disposable, and it pains me to say this because I love the idea of the Walmart books. I collect them. The only one I don't collect is Teen Titans. I collect the other four, and I've gotten the holiday specials. So Tom King's doing a very dark Superman story. Bendis is doing a very fluffy and fun but pretty disposable Batman story, and Jimmy Palmiotti and Amanda Connor are doing a pretty fluffy but kind of disposable Wonder Woman story. That being said, I think it's doing the same thing that the regular Wonder Woman title is doing right now, but it's more fun than that one. So they're fun books. I'm really glad they exist because they exist as sort of a history and also a jumping on point for people who just want to get into comics who aren't already in there from Walmart.
But ultimately, yes, there's not a lot to it. It's not that they're bad, because they're not. It's just, it's 12 pages, and there's not a lot of movement. It's you got to read 12 issues straight to get the full story, and even then, that's not much. Eventually, we all know this is eventually going to happen, because when you combine 12 issues of 12-page story arcs, what do you get? 144 pages. And what does that get you? That gets you exactly around the same size as a normal trade paperback. So eventually all will be collected. I'm positive of that. And when it does, maybe it'll read better, but as an individual month-to-month thing, it just feels like that's it. That's all that happened. That's all I ever feel like.
Well, like I said, Tom King's stuff they're like beautifully crafted little gems with pain and death in the center, because it's Tom King. But you can do a really great short story every week, every month. Bendis and Palmiotti are not doing that. They're writing for the trade, and that's fine, but it does mean that it feels like they're tiny little trips.
Yes. So, hopefully you enjoyed those theories. It's not, most of it's not theories. It's more of a educated guesses, which is still theories, I guess. Anyway, so if you guys have any comments, that actually wraps up all of our comments. If you guys have any comments or questions that you'd like us to talk about in the next episode, be sure to send those comments in. You can do so by posting them either on the actual podcast post, which is the most convenient, but definitely not the end-all, be-all. You can leave comments on our Discord. You can leave comments on Twitter, Facebook, YouTube, any of the places that you're listening to this podcast. If you leave a comment, we will get the comment ported over to the site so that we use it for the next episode. No need to fear, it will be talked about on the next episode. I've made sure that I do not miss these, so be sure to send your comments in. That being said, that is all for this episode. I want to remind everybody to head over to the site for the latest news related to movies, TV, merchandise, video games, and of course the comics. Also, be sure to check out all the other podcasts that we have to offer, including the latest episodes of Backworld to Oracle, Robin Everyone Loves the Drake, Bat Fans, all have new episodes. There's also the latest episode of Bat Books for Beginners, dives into Batman Battle for the Cowl, and then there's also, like I said, a brand new show that just launched at the beginning of the month called Everyone Loves Young Justice, which is going to dive into everything Young Justice, the TV series, the TV tie-in series, the video game that released for it, the old 90s series, the new series, everything Young Justice, which obviously has a lot to do with Tim Drake. So check out that. There's also another show I'm in talks to bring yet another podcast to TBU, and I'm not going to reveal anything at this point, but I should be able to reveal everything by the next episode. But I'll just give this simple hint, which is it's a show that delves into a completely different area of the fandom that we have yet to even touch, which is insane that it's even possible after 10 years, but it's certainly possible because it's happened. So that show should be coming soon as well, so I'll give you more information on that next episode. That being said, also follow us on Facebook, Twitter, and YouTube for all the latest news and videos from the Batman universe. Also, you can leave us reviews on iTunes. I'll be honest, I don't really pay attention to those anymore because there's too many people who claim that I'm a negative person who's too long-winded, and that's exactly right. That's exactly how
I feel like we've been really positive for the last several months.
Oh, that's
What's
fine.
up,
but
guys?
nobody leaves comments in the last several months. Everybody leaves all the comments that I see are from 2 years ago and all these other things. But don't worry, everybody who's describing me as a negative person who's very long-winded, that's exactly how my wife describes me. So I'm okay with that. So that being said, of course, leave your comments. And like I said, if you have any desire to support us and you would like to get extra content, support us on Patreon, or send us an email at tbu@thebatmanuniverse.net if you're interested in supporting us with your skills instead. That all being said, that is everything for this episode. This is Dustin.
This is Steph.
And this is Ian.
And you've been listening to the Batman Universe Comic Podcast. We'll see you guys in 2 weeks.
Lowering mayor package through home.
Madam Mayor! Thanks for dropping by.
I've only got one thing to say to you, Joker.
Well, you better make it fast.
Do you like to gamble?
Oh, I certainly do.
Do you ever play roulette?
On occasion.
Well, let me give you a word of advice.
I'm all ears.
When playing roulette...
Yes?
Always bet on black.
Batman! What are you doing? You're completely outnumbered here. Are you nuts?
You want to get nuts? Come on, let's get nuts. Because I just wrote a song about how I'm going to kick all your butts.
Stop him before he starts singing!
In the darkest night, I make the bad guys fall. There's a million heroes. Computer overcompensate, but I'm the best of them all.
I'm on my way, sir.
Who has the coolest gadget? Who has the tricked out ride? Who does the sickest backflips? Batman! You think my muscles are big? Thank you. You haven't seen my brain. Ladies, it's okay if you stare. Why? 'Cause I'm a billionaire!
Get it together, guys! You're making me look bad in front of Batman!
Computer, where's the bomb?
The bomb is located at the base of the energy core.
What the? I get the last laugh. I get the final grin. Throw you into the asylum with Harley Quinn. Turn Two-Face to black and blue face. I'm 100% and not Bruce Wayne.
Kiss me, Batman.
Who's the manliest man? With the buns of steel. Who can choke hold a bear? Who never skips leg day? Who always pays their taxes? I'm Batman.
How is he beating all of you again?
Because I'm Batman. I'm Batman.
Hi, Batman. So weird to keep running into you.